Best coaches in the game, we really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief. We be piecing these puzzles, occupy the chunk of the pie. Ain't no lie when we hit the block, helmet's casket is top. You be seeing helmet after helmet, helmet after helmet. First place, second place, fifth place, eighth place, 12th place, 15, 16, 20. So many helmets, you got blurred vision, we got...
Back once again, another DFS Army Bold Call Fantasy Football Podcast. A lot to uncover. I'm Alan Cislowski here with the owner-in-chief, Kevin Allen, a.k.a. The Geek. What's up, my friend?
What's up, my man? I'm excited to talk some NFL free agency and with the GOAT himself.
That's right.
Special guest from Rotowire, Jim Covenentry.
No, not Jim Covenentry. The Jim Covenentry.
Jim Covenentry. Here we go.
Man, the only goat in me is eating grass. That's about it, guys. But thank you anyway.
Yeah. Jim has quickly become a favorite of the Bold Call podcast. I mean, you've become our most requested guest, so we had to give the people what they want. Jim, as you know, does all his content for Rotowire and can be found at Jim Covenentry NFL on Twitter. That's correct?
Absolutely correct. Yes.
Yeah. Known for his live streams, his fantasy football advice, and his NFL prowess. So that's what we're going to do today, Geek, right? We're going to unpack. We brought in our favorite expert, one of our favorite experts for sure.
But honestly, it's so much going on. Every time I look up on Twitter, and obviously it's the off season, and we're paying attention to golf, and we're paying attention to fantasy baseballs coming up, and we've got NBA, but nothing supersedes football. And we've got, is it called the hot stove for NFL? Like, I know it's the MLB term, but we've got the hot stove frying like never before. And Jim, we brought you here to make some sense of it. So I want to just start position by position group because it's too much to cover. And let's start at the biggest position of all, the quarterback position, which is, I've never seen anything like it. QBs changing hands, mysteries. I don't know what the hell's going on. So Let's start with the quarterback position and give us an update on what's gone on in the free agency market around the quarterback position so far, because lots of changes.
So there's really one guarantee that's out there of all the changes. It's that Ryan Fitzpatrick will be starting in Washington. All the other moves, and we'll talk about them, the other moves are all potential starters based on either contract or situation. But Ryan Fitzpatrick ends up in a wonderful spot. And as I've watched him throughout his career, he has improved in his late 30s. His last two seasons are arguably the best of his career. He used to come out of the gates hot, and then he would implode. He doesn't implode much anymore. He doesn't have those bad Fitz games. He goes to a Washington team that can now utilize Terry McLaurin to his full potential because Ryan Fitzpatrick is one of those gunslingers who has no issue turning the ball loose into coverage and letting his receiver make a play. And I know we'll get to receivers later, but they brought in Curtis Samuel this morning. And what an amazing underneath the field option. We know Fitz doesn't throw a ton underneath, but he'll have to at times. But Fitzpatrick goes into a good situation. The only concern, that defense may be so good that it may not be the Fitz that we like throwing the ball 35 to 40 times. This could be a 28 to 32 passes a game. Still a fantasy option in two quarterback leagues, but maybe not the top five option he's come in at from time to time.
I have a question for you. So you bring up a good point about Curtis Samuel being brought in, and it's a two-part question. One, because Fitzpatrick has always supported two fantasy receivers very fruitfully. Okay, I mean, going all the way back to his days in Tennessee and in Houston and all of the stops along the way. Who's going to be the second receiver? Because we know Terry McLaurin is now a rock-solid third-round pick. Who's that second receiver? Is it Cam Sims? Is it Curtis Samuel? And does Curtis Samuel, with his running ability, affect our beloved Antonio Gibson shares in Dynasty?
Oh, it's a wonderful question. So first of all, what we mentioned earlier, Fitz has been on some bad teams. And as a result, we said a few moments ago, he's thrown the ball upwards of 40 times a game. That is why he's been able to support two fantasy receivers heavily. I'm telling you, this Washington defense could be the best in the league this year. They added William Jackson at corner to go with that devastating pass rush. They may not be giving up more than 17 points a game. And if that's the case, Fitzpatrick will not support a second receiver because you mentioned Cam Sims, and that's a brilliant move. He's 6'5", like 214. He doesn't have crazy wheels, but he can get downfield. He would quick become a favorite of Fitzpatrick. But the problem is, Curtis Samuel is going to see some targets. Logan Thomas is going to see some targets. And so I think it's going to be a number one with McLaurin. And then the other three are going to have their weeks here and there. But I do not see one of those players coming out as, yes, this is the clear second option from week to week. Now, you asked about Antonio Gibson. Do you want to go further on the receiver point, or want me to go right to Gibson?
Right to Gibson.
Yeah. What I was going to say, one of my big things, Jim, is, and this is a geek philosophy that if you've ever seen this, I talk about the running back position, and I want running backs on winning teams. You are a running back on a losing team, you don't do as well. Does this transform Washington into a winning team where the running back, actually the benefit goes most to the running back position, because now they're in a position ahead in games, great defense, run out the clock?
Absolutely. Gibson is in an outstanding spot here. There are a few different scenarios in which he thrives, and I think there's very little downside. The first scenario is maybe the defense doesn't take that leap from being a very good to an elite defense. If they don't do that, then Gibson may see more opportunities where the offense has to put more receivers on the field to lighten the box and give him room to run. But as you mentioned, Kevin, more likely than not, they're going to play with leads frequently, or at least close games. Because in close games, you don't need to go as pass heavy if you feel your team can shorten the game on the ground. Gibson showed a lot of traits that show that he can handle a workload, he can carry a team, and the offensive line is good enough. Now, we love the PPR potential from last year, but I'm a little concerned about that because Fitz is not your typical check the ball to your running back guy. His eyes are downfield, and with the players he has, I don't think he feels compelled to check down. So Gibson will be great as a runner, and yes, he'll get some receptions. And I don't think J.D. McKissic is a factor in this version of the offense. He was perfect with Alex Smith and company last year, but not with Fitz. So
Sell J.D. McKissic.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
What savvy player is buying J.D. McKissic in Dynasty? Obviously, unless you're playing in a league with first-time Dynasty players. So, and then we'll move on from this subject, but just give me a quick percentage chance. Can Tyler Heineke beat out Fitz? I mean, they're not paying him high-end money at all. What do you handicap this competition at?
So it's 90-10. Taylor Heineke had a great playoff game. Caught Tampa Bay off guard. Tampa Bay probably came in a little unmotivated, thinking they had an easy walkover win. Taylor Heineke, I don't feel, has the ability to be consistent, and that's what's going to be big. They will get, at this stage of Fitzpatrick's career, he's been consistent the last couple of years, and that's what they need to be a winning program. To bring him in, he's not mentoring Heineke. Heineke is not this great quarterback of the future. He had a real brief run of one game, and I think he's a career backup.
He did look good in that one game, though. But
hey, Geek, isn't this fun? I mean, like, I get energy just from. We're here with Jim Covenentry at Jim Covenentry NFL on Twitter. Give him a follow if you even want to get smarter at fantasy football. If you just like being how you are, that's fine. But if you want to get smarter, go on there and follow at Jim Covenentry NFL. And Geek, what's your next question? We can go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, Jim makes it. We have a lot more hot stove, and especially at the quarterback position, to really delve into. Rumors have it that the Panthers are pretty much in on any quarterback discussion that could possibly happen. You've got Houston's beat writers talking about maybe we are open to trading Deshaun Watson. You've got the whole Russell Wilson situation, and of course, the biggest disaster of them all. What the hell's going on in Chicago? Do they not want to win? Is this why is Ryan Pace?
Jim is from Chicago. He's a Bears fan.
I mean, what is going on over there? Is this one of those local people own teams like the Packers where no one's making decisions and they're just going nuts? What is going on? There's such a good potential team that's ruined by terrible GMing.
Finding a quarterback is one of the most difficult things maybe in human history, right? It's very difficult. The Bears draft about 20. You're not getting a quarterback at 20. And the problem is they made an all-in offer to the Seahawks for Russell Wilson. But again, picking 20th, Seattle's not getting a quarterback out of that deal. That's why I believe they are not making a deal with the Bears. And whatever team would potentially acquire Wilson will not be a bad team in the future. So those future draft picks will be lower first-round picks. So what the Bears were stuck with is they need a body back there. And that's all they can find is a body. Now, I imagine they'll try to trade up, but nobody's going to trade up. The Bears don't have that ammunition. They're low picks. That's the problem.
You know why they don't have that ammunition? Because Ryan Pace traded away all of their future draft picks to move up so that he could avoid getting the studs and picked up Mr. Trubisky. What's wrong with this guy?
All right. There's some recent news that broke minutes before this podcast went on. I want you to make sense of it all. Josh Jacobs, up until today, was going in the second round of dynasty startup drafts. He was a rock solid second round best ball pick. Now they add Kenyon Drake. I mean, there's going to be an overreaction here, but unpack Kenyon Drake to the Raiders for us. Why is he there, and what's going to happen for fantasy?
Well, the sad news is John Gruden and the Raiders staff has made it very clear by their actions that they do not want Josh Jacobs being part of the receiving game. They have brought in any player with pass game chops. Devontae Booker, Jalen Richard, who was there. They brought other players in that didn't make the team, but it's been a constant mill of players. Kenyon Drake may not be the greatest receiver in the world, but he is a good receiver, and they are not bringing him in to be an interior runner. He had 2.8 yards per carry last year. He was awful in that role. But I think they feel this is what they've been trying to do for a couple of years. So Josh Jacobs, he's a two-down grinder with some goal line opportunities. This significantly hurts his fantasy value because Drake is not that replaceable type of guy like a Richard or a Devontae Booker, who's just okay, well, a couple snaps for a breather. No, this is a third down back they signed.
So where do you see him going? Now, let's say everyone's had a chance to digest it. Where will Josh Jacobs go in best ball?
See, the desperation for running backs always dictates that he will go earlier now than he should. My estimation is he will go in the late third to early fourth round because people aren't going to let a running back of his caliber slide past that spot, because we know once you get past the top 18, 20 running backs, you are really playing with fire.
Let's stay on that topic just for a second and do a little something I like to do. And you guys will be more on top of this than I am. But Josh Jacobs, right? For me, I don't think Kenyon Drake really moves the needle a ton. I didn't love him anyway. He hasn't been great. Who would you? Let's play a little would you rather. Okay, now I don't have the ADP numbers in front of me, so I'm going to have to do a little guessing unless, Alan, you could give me an idea of who's going in this range.
I know Jim is a slave to ADP too, meaning we study it, we know it. Yeah. I could probably tell you a player pretty close to it.
Where is the range right now? Obviously, and Antonio, that's not where Jacobs got to be going after those guys. Is it Miles Sanders? What's the range where you're like, all right, Leonard Fournette, not sure where he's going to be. I might take him over him. What's the range right now where you're looking at Josh Jacobs?
So I'm pulling my big board up right now. And honestly, he is going to go right around running back 20. At this point, I put Joe Mixon ahead of him. I had Mixon drop because of the last couple of years in the blocking schemes, but I probably had, let me see, actually 23. I'm going to put him in the range where we're not sure we're getting on Myles Gaskin, Kareem Hunt, Ronald Jones, James Conner, David Johnson. He's in that group of running backs now. Melvin Gordon is probably in that group. We maybe later can talk about Mike Boone. I'm very excited about him.
Hey, tell me real quick, why is Mike Boone the most added player on Sleeper right now? What's going on with Mike Boone? I must have missed this piece of news.
And I know nobody listened to my shows because I was hyping him up a couple weeks ago.
You were hyping him up, okay.
But that wasn't why, because nobody listens to me anyway, which is fine.
We listen.
So I appreciate that. So Denver comes in and signs Boone, who was a restricted free agent, who the Vikings didn't tender. They signed him to a contract. And then the next day, which was today, Philip Lindsay, they rescinded.
Right.
Yeah, they rescinded the restricted tag they put on him. And Mike Boone. So people think, because they don't see him much, I think he's a little guy like Lindsey.
Mm-hmm.
Lindsey was a tiny BMI player, but Mike Boone is 5'10", 206. That is pretty good size. Yet he has 81st percentile speed, 100th percentile explosiveness, and 58th percentile agility. He could be the next big thing at running back. Now, Melvin Gordon's there, and Melvin Gordon clearly is the lead back to start things out. But we've seen the time he's been there, the coaching staff has let Lindsey play a lot, and they subbed him out because he was small, which is why they let him go. Bad perception. Boone has the potential to come in and be 50-50. And if he gets red hot and gets going, he's not so small. They're going to say, well, let's put you to the side. He could steal that job.
Says and I, for many years, have talked about how Melvin Gordon seems to have been almost like a luck career versus a talent career. And I hate to say it, I don't play football, but he's just never been that great as a runner. He just gets a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah, well, he just knows how to score touchdowns. But I just want on Mike Boone real quick. I want to point out from Jacksonville, where I currently reside, from Jacksonville, So, yeah, I saw him as the most added on Sleeper. I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to Google it. I'm going to wait for Jim. But, as Geek points out, Melvin Gordon is not a scary person on the depth chart to have to leap there. All right.
Let's continue on the running back position, okay, Jim, because this is exciting stuff. Obviously, one of the, we have the big piece. Aaron Jones stays in Green Bay. We've got Jamal Williams now kind of, where did he just sign? With Detroit, kind of a backup player. But there are some teams that don't have a running back. What's going on? Arizona, I don't know if Edmonds is like the guy over there, or they're going to bring somebody in. You've got Seattle, nothing going on. They like to lean on their running back. Maybe it's Rashad Penny. Any sort of insights on the running back position and some of this hot stove movement and maybe some new fantasy relevant players we hadn't thought about?
So Arizona, yes, as you mentioned, Chase Edmonds is in the fold. He was disappointing down the stretch. He had a couple opportunities when Drake was hurt, and he soiled the bed pretty heavily in those opportunities. Now, he's a great pass catcher. He was catching almost 5 passes a game for the majority of the season. So he is going to be a PPR player to target. But they drafted Eno Benjamin in the 7th round last year, and they stashed him. They still have him. It's possible he emerges. But don't think for a minute that they're not going to go into the draft and not address the running back position. I think although they like Edmonds, I think they saw enough to know that they can't lean on him as the guy. I know his metrics show otherwise, but he really missed those opportunities. So I think we are needing more data to have an accurate assessment of that backfield. And in Seattle, the prices of free agency are going down. I'm going to veer off for just a second here. The salary cap. I go to overthecap.com to study this. Teams generally need about $10 million of cap space for their rookie draft crop. Well, right now, there are only about 10 to 12 teams that have significantly more than that amount of money. So there's not much money left to go around in free agency. So that's going to be a problem. But the running backs who are out there, and there aren't a ton of them, but they're going to be signing low contract deals. Chris Carson is yet to sign, and the names are going to fly by me here. But there are players who
Connor, Leonard Fournette.
Yes, yes.
Even Todd Gurley, someone's going to sign him.
No, stop. That's not a – come on.
No, I'm saying you may not like him, and you may think that he's a shell of himself, but – he's going to help some team with 7 to 8 carries a game. I mean,
what about my boy Darius Geis? Is he getting another chance? I mean, forgiveness, baby. No,
not
no forgiveness.
That's funny.
All right, I want to stay on track here and just explain to me. Normally, the wide receivers and the high end ones go flying off in free agency. Why are the cream of the crop? I guess the 2 cream of the crop, Allen Robinson and Godwin were tagged, but why is Juju Smith-Schuster not signed yet, or any of the guys at the top of the class?
Kenny Golladay, Will Fuller. Yep. It's the salary cap. When the cap went down to $183 million, for whatever reason, wide receiver became the position that was completely ignored in free agency. And really, to a degree, running back was as well, because the Packers just re-upped Aaron Jones. There have been no significant until today and yesterday, Mike Boone's not considered a significant move. We like him for fantasy, but not a significant move. And then obviously today, Kenny and Drake, that's not a high level move. So we're seeing that teams are like building the infrastructure of their squads. We see them building their defenses, their lines, tight end position in New England. But
New England,
yes,
they're just hoarding like a dynasty team in a Premier League. Like, hey,
but wait a second. But wait a second. So, but the low end of the wide receiver market is, I mean, Aguilar was signed. Even Corey Davis was probably smart to move quickly. So is that why? Because these guys are not going to command 15 plus a year?
Correct. And if their agents, which they likely were, they understood the landscape of this market. And the lower guys needed to take a deal while they could. So once a deal emerged and it was reasonable money, as again, the agents would realize that how little money was out there from the cap, they had to get those deals done. The star players like Fuller, Galladay, and Juju, consider Juju what you like, but they want money. Now, what they're going to end up doing is one of two things. They're either going to probably settle for a larger one-year deal from a team, or they're going to look to go with a contender on a lower cost deal to boost their stock for the future. Those are the only routes they're going to have to go at this point, or go to a bad team. There's three teams with a ton of cap money: the Jets, the Jaguars, and the Colts.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. I thought the Colts would be the Juju spot for sure. News is breaking left and right while we're right here on the live stream. I saw Mitch Trubisky just landed in Buffalo to back up Josh Allen. That makes a ton of sense to me. An experienced backup in the unlikely event or hopeful not event that Josh Allen misses a few games. Any other players, Kevin, that you want to hit on before I go again?
Well, I mean, with Juju, and again, coming back to the wide receiver position, he's rumored. I like what you said. I'm not sure if he's a star or not. He's being talked about to the New York Jets right now, or maybe back to Pittsburgh. But the Jets would be an interesting move because they would just cut Jay Crowder, save the $10 million, shift it right over to Smith-Schuster. I think that's an upgrade right there for equal money.
Yeah. Jamison Crowder has been so productive for them. I always was wondering about Juju Smith-Schuster and that big year he had. I wondered how much was the attention that Antonio Brown drew, and the fact that Ben Roethlisberger still had the arm to get the ball easily to Smith-Schuster. And I wondered how much was cause and effect in terms of what Smith-Schuster was. And we've seen the last couple of years, there have been some quarterback issues, some injury issues, but he doesn't look like a superstar right now.
No,
and
he should not get superstar money. If they pay him that, it's a big mistake.
What's
what did Corey Davis get paid? Do we know? What was that deal?
I think it was like 3 for 36, 25 guaranteed, something like that, Jim.
That sounds right. Yeah,
something like that. Now, I was going to make an interesting parallel between Corey Davis and Juju Smith-Schuster. They have the exact type of same career, except in the opposite, where Juju came out of the gate hot and Corey Davis came out of the gate slow, and now Juju slowed down and Corey Davis is picked up. They're like the same career on each other's head. So I kind of equate them to the same type of player where they're both good blockers, miscast as the number one, and probably be a good complementary number two. Let's switch over now that to Atlanta. I want to specifically ask you about them. Do you think that any of the free agent running backs or receivers out there could end up in Atlanta? They seem to me to be one of the teams now that Arthur Smith is the head coach that I think is going to have really good fantasy value. Talk about them from a free agency perspective and even a rookie draft perspective.
The draft is where it's going to have to be. As I change my documents, look for the draft, see what draft picks they have here.
They have 4, right? Number 4.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you exactly which ones they have. I always like to reference that as well. Mm-hmm. But as we're talking about that, they are almost $1 million over the cap. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just $1 million. They have to account for their rookies.
So it's 11 million, right by your thesis before. It's 11 million then?
So yes. So it's very problematic for them right now in terms of getting any type of a player in free agency. Now the draft, and for whatever reason, I'm not finding my actual draft spot, so I apologize. I always list what everybody has in terms of the draft, and I don't have that ready.
Well, they pick at number 4. And by the way, we're sitting here with Jim Covenentry of Rotowire, Jim Covenentry NFL on Twitter. Definitely go give him a follow. See all his content over there. This is the DFS Army Bowl Call podcast, and we are talking free agent frenzy.
Let me throw this back on the Atlanta draft pick situation. Obviously, that's a team. It's a little older at this point. Some needs. Do they go quarterback with pick number 4? There's a lot of quarterbacks that are legit right now. Matt Ryan, very old. Or are they trading back in the draft because somebody wants a quarterback there? You have Zach Wilson. You have the big names, the Lawrence,
Justin Fields, and all those guys.
But there's a few secondary names that now all look like they're top 10 guys that people will trade up for. So does Atlanta go for the quarterback here? Do they put a guy on the bench for a year and say, hey, Matty Ice, let's do it one last time, and then we're bringing in the youngster?
So I would think if they have a quarterback valuation of a player they think will be a franchise changer and he falls to pick 4. Some people have 3 quarterbacks identified as that. Some think it may be more than that. If Atlanta's draft board merits them taking the heir apparent, they need to do that because they could improve this year. Julio Jones was hurt a lot. Now maybe he's getting old and that'll be a trend. But bringing Arthur Smith in, he was really a polished play caller, sets up defenses. If they come in and win 6 to 9 games, they're not in the quarterback market. This is their opportunity to get a quarterback again based on their draft board. The 4 pick is huge for them. But if they don't have one, then they have to try to trade back because at that point, the draft capital will be much more important to them in the building blocks. But quarterback has to be priority number 1. And I don't know that Ryan has more than a couple of years, but should they draft somebody, then he would be an excellent trade candidate in the offseason.
I want to switch it up for a second here. We can come back to free agents, but I want to go into strategy right now. Jim, I know you love drafting. You're a masterful drafter. How are you handling best balls this year? Are you going to, because that's the season we're in right now. There's no better way to get ready for your season long draft than start. Geek and I, and by the way, Geek crushed it. The year before last where you just went 25 out of 27 best balls.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I hit like a 90% cash rate.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. So,
But in fairness, last year it was horrible.
Okay, all right.
It evened out.
So recalibrate us. What's the way that you're drafting your best ball now? And, it's a little different than redraft or dynasty. So how should we do it? Is it still running back early? Talk to us about how your draft strategy is for this 2021.
Yeah, I try to learn a lot year to year, and I've always seen the scarcity at running back. And I think what became a mistake over time is that I felt that the scarcity at running back was causing me to take too many of them too early in the draft because I was worried I wouldn't have running backs. But what I've learned is this. I do have at least 12 running backs as guys who would be considered first-round type values. So I am going to take a running back first. But after that, I am constructing my big board, and based on my big board, if the next player on my board is a wide receiver, that's where I'm going. If the next 2 or 3 picks, wide receiver, tight end, whatever it is, I am following my board. I am taking players with the best combination of floor and ceiling early. I do tend to like upside later in drafts, but in best ball, stacking players is a big deal if you're in a tournament. If you're in a best ball 12-team league, we don't need to stack so much. We can basically get our best valuations of players on our roster and, again, construct enough of the skill positions so that you can withstand those injury times. But if you're in one of those that plays for a jackpot, you have to stack players and identify offenses that have some cheap pieces that you could put in together. For instance, let's say you're stacking Dallas somehow. Well, if you could find the cheapest of the 3 receivers, Michael Gallup, maybe a Blake Jarwin later, but you find cheaper pieces of that offense while still retaining the integrity of your draft and making sure you get those top players, and don't just say, I'm going to take this guy because he's on a team I want to stack and pass up on Calvin Ridley, where you take a receiver who's 2 rungs lower, but he's on the team you want. I just want
to point out, how in-depth Jim's research goes. When you're throwing out Blake Jarwin, everybody forgot about Blake Jarwin. He's hurt the whole year. No one even knows that name. And throwing out a little Blake Jarwin TE26 number right there. I love it.
But, people were hot on him, Blake Jarwin, last year.
Yes,
I love that you're bringing that up.
But he gets forgotten. A guy that's hurt the whole year, he's forgotten. That's it. I forgot about him.
And he looked good out of the gate, too. So that's an interesting name. All right. So now that we're on draft strategy, we shifted to tight ends. We're going to tangent all over the place. The buzziest name in tight end land right now is Irv Smith. In or out, Irv Smith. Give us your Irv Smith take, since he's the greatest tight end to ever be in fantasy in 2021.
I have liked Irv Smith even last year as a breakout candidate. But when he had opportunity last year with Kyle Rudolph out, Tyler Conklin was doing damage. So I'm a little concerned. I'm very concerned that, first of all,
he's tied at 11 right now in best ball.
That's crazy. Ridiculous.
Yes. And had Tyler Conklin not made an impact while he was playing late last season, I might be more in on Irv Smith. But that has tempered my enthusiasm quite a bit. And Justin Jefferson is literally uncoverable. In the second half of the season, teams had already rolled their defenses to him, and he was still getting open on pretty much every play. And Adam Thielen's back, and he's not washed up. He is fine. As a number 2, outstanding. Not a number 1 anymore. But remember, the identity of that team, they want to run a lot, and they're going to run a lot. Their defense, they were horrible last year, and we knew that going in. But as the season went on, Mike Zimmer got that unit improving, and they're making some additions. Those rookies they had are a year older. I don't think it's going to be a throw the ball all over the field lot. Justin Jefferson's your guy. I don't think Irv Smith gets the volume. And with Conklin in there, I think that the ADP is going to keep him off of my teams this season.
I love it. Let's, Jim, can we stick with the tight end position real quick? Because I love that call. And there's always some tight end that flies their way up the board that shouldn't be. That is like, if that wasn't happening, it's not fantasy football, right? So I'm going to throw 2 names at you here that I think maybe, I think they should be flying up the boards, and we'll see if they are.
I already know which one of them are. I can mind read you.
Well, I know you know what. I'm going to go to that guy second. But the first guy is Tyler Higbee. Of course, new quarterback, new situation. The kryptonite that is Gerald Everett is gone. Go away, kryptonite. I need Tyler Higbee to get the full workload. Does he break out? Do we get the Tyler Higbee we were hoping for last season this year? And secondly, because I'm going to throw 2 at you.
Well, let's hold it. Let him answer that one and not to distract.
All right, I'll hold the other one.
You'll get the next question too.
There we go.
We're fighting for your attention, Jim. We love you.
I was one of the biggest detractors anywhere of Tyler Higbee last season. In his 2019 breakout, you could not have pieced together a better tight end schedule. He faced 4 of the very bottom tight end defenses, and then he had the 49ers in there who were a top 6 unit, but had 3 injuries in their secondary for that game. Not only that group of 100-yard games, we don't see anybody do that, but the problem is that Higbee had that run, and people thought that is what the player he was. His measurables never showed that was something he was going to become. It was a perfect storm of situation and circumstance. As an athlete, he's dead middle in terms of speed. He didn't measure for explosiveness and agility, but when I watch him on film, he is very ordinary. Now, we saw frequently, he had a 3-touchdown game last year. The Eagles simply didn't cover him. All 3 touchdowns. There was not a defender within 5 yards of him. And so if he is indeed now, as expected, the primary tight end, defenses will account for him. They're not going to sell out for him. But you see, Matthew Stafford is in town. And Sean McVay likes to do a lot of different things offensively. But Matthew Stafford has a big arm. He's not looking to check down, and I don't think Sean McVay wants him to check down. I think he wants to have a more explosive offense this season. And so I think Robert Woods is in good shape. They're going to add somebody on the outside. I think they are going to have more of a downfield presence this year, and I don't think the tight end is a big part of that offense. They go back, I think, to 11 personnel. They were playing a lot of 2 tight ends since their offense was figured out by Vic Fangio a couple years back and in the Super Bowl. But I think they go back to 11 because they have a quarterback they don't have to hide anymore.
There we go. Now, the second guy that I think is going to come up a lot, and rightfully so, because I think this is the opposite situation where in Tennessee, Jonnu Smith was always looked at as the top guy. He ran a few more routes, but the more productive tight end was Tony Ferkser, who shows up on the Where My Turd's At spinner during the Geeks. He's one of those guys that basically breaks showdowns whenever he's on them for on DraftKings and FanDuel. He's always that random cheap player that scores a touchdown. So Anthony Ferkser, does he now elevate to a top 12 ADP at tight end? And is he worthy of one? And of course, I believe there's another gentleman there, Jeff Swain, or there's another guy, Michael Pruitt, I think it is, one of those names. There's a backup there, but Firkser has been the productive guy.
Kevin, what we can't lose sight of is Arthur Smith is gone. Arthur Smith was literally genius. He predicated the offense as needed around Derrick Henry.
And Jim, wasn't he the tight ends coach before the offensive coordinator too?
He was. He absolutely was. Great call on it. Not many know that, I don't think. And what Arthur Smith did best, he predicated the offense around Derrick Henry. All of the passing game concepts were built on play action. Using secondary tight ends as weapons is genius, and Bill Belichickian as well, where you get that tight end leaked out that nobody is looking at. Firkser was in a perfect spot to take advantage of that. Defenses must go into games prior years concerned with Jonnu Smith, who has 88th percentile speed, 94th percentile explosiveness. He had to be accounted for. The one thing they utilized him horribly last year. Jonnu Smith's ADOT was 8.3 and 9.8 the prior 2 seasons. Last year, 6.9. They were dumping him off these screen passes. I do like your call. Firkser is a good player, but the play action game is not going to be what it was. The tight end may not have the significance. And if Firkser does move to more of a lead tight end role and has appropriate coverage as a number 1 tight end, I don't know that he has the athletic skill set as Jonnu Smith had to exploit that.
So connecting those dots, the Arthur Smith dots, does that mean that you're a little bit more bullish on Hayden Hurst, being that he's now the tight end in Arthur Smith's Atlanta system?
Maybe. Here's the problem.
That's a definite maybe. That's a definite maybe.
I mean, because Jonnu didn't do well. Maybe it's the secondary. Maybe it's the backup tight end. Or maybe they don't have a running back, so none of this matters.
Yeah, so here's the problem. Arthur Smith's genius was he took what he had and built something around it. I don't think this is what he went into coaching saying, oh, I'm going to run the ball. Nobody says that. And I'm going to make the passing game work. I think he saw the ingredients in the kitchen. He cooked up a masterpiece. And he kept making their players fantasy relevant in the passing game despite few pass attempts. Now, they don't have a running game. They don't have nearly the offensive line that Tennessee had. Certainly don't have Derrick Henry. So this offense is going to be way different because he doesn't have those ingredients in the kitchen. We don't know what he's going to do because we don't have a body of work on Arthur Smith other than the Titans situation. We do know that he was dynamic at putting his best players in the best circumstances. So to me, that speaks to a Julio and Calvin Ridley-centric offense. But you're right, Kevin. At some point, the tight end will be a factor. That middle of the field is huge. But is it Russell Gage, who really broke out of it, or is it Hayden Hurst? And we are going to have to read the tea leaves. We don't know if there'll be preseason games this year because of COVID. If there are, it's a situation. I want to watch their formation usage, and I want to see how they use some of these even secondary players so I can get a feel for the offense they want to run. So it is an indeterminate answer right now.
I got a question here for Jim. Will you complete with your tight end questions there, Kevin?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So what do you think we could do to make the fantasy game even better? I mean, fantasy football is more popular than it's ever been. Now, Dynasty is growing exponentially. People are more interested in that. DFS is now, everyone at least dabbles in it. Obviously, it's the genesis of this company, DFSARMY. So what do you think we could do in season-long football to make it a better game?
The way to make it better is simple. Add more starting players to the roster. It increases the talent level. 3 flexes, always 2 quarterbacks. The more players that have to start in the starting lineup, again, it enhances the skill of the fantasy manager. It makes more shallow the free agent pool. Mm-hmm. It allows people to not luck into results as frequently as they do now. And this one is outside the box. This is like my dream league. My dream league is you play double headers. Now there'll be 17 games this season, so we're going to have 18 weeks. But you play double headers for about 11 weeks. and then you take 4 playoff teams. Then you have a best of 3 for the 1-4, and then 2-3. And then you have a best of 3 for the championship, and the remaining teams play in a round robin where everybody plays each other once, and then the 2 winners of that play for money in that championship of that. But you definitely put money in that because you don't want your fantasy players out after week 11. You want them to have something significant at stake. And so that's my grand plan for taking the luck to a reduced level and adding the fun for everybody.
That's interesting, right? 11 regular season weeks. I like that a lot, actually.
Let me build off that a little bit and kind of expand this question in 2 ways. Number one, so you said something that I totally agree with. I think the evolution of fantasy football at this point, not having 2 QBs in your league is just, it's absolutely crazy. It should not be. That should be eliminated. But with that being said, most people do play in a 1 QB league. And I want to throw this question at you because I made my bones in fantasy football figuring out pretty early on that you shouldn't take a quarterback early, right? That was not that was not common knowledge in 2008 and 2006 and even 10. That was not known, but I was like, wow, I could dominate my idiot friends because they all want Peyton Manning on their team and I want him too, but I'll just take Phillip Rivers in like the 9th round and I'll be fine. And that's going back a ways. So today with the emergence, even in single QB leagues, Jim, of running quarterbacks that are difference makers. Now, there's a lot of them now, and maybe this is irrelevant, but is there an argument to throw out the take your QB late discussion and say, you know what, if Kyler Murray, if Josh Allen, if Dak is hanging out in the 2nd round, I just got to take them because they're so good? Or do we say, no, that rule remains in the single QB league, wait till later, you'll still get somebody decent?
I think you still wait till later because the amount of points between the drop off from player to player is not steep enough to merit it. Now, last year, I was targeting those quarterbacks that were in the 3 to 6 range. It was Wilson, Watson, Kyler, and there was a 4th one.
Lamar.
I think Lamar was going 2, though.
Yeah.
There was 4 of them in that second tier. Dak.
Oh, okay,
Dak
in the second. Oh, they got you in the 2nd tier of.
Yeah, and then
Josh Allen was the 2nd tier last year too.
He might have even been 3rd.
Yeah, you're right. So the way drafts were falling, I was getting to the 6th round. And at that point, I was not excited about the running backs and receivers on the board, wasn't ready for the tight ends there. So that was where I was naturally gravitating to quarterbacks. It was that tier of those players who had the rushing upside. But I felt at that point, the value was reasonable because I didn't want to have the drop off, as you mentioned, Kevin. I wanted a quarterback with some running chops, and those running quarterbacks were going to go at a certain point in time. So if it was possible, I wanted to land one of those, but I did not want to pay the premium freight of a 2nd round pick or so. Could not pull the trigger on that.
Smart move, and that actually worked really well last year because, in particular, the top 2 guys, Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, were not anywhere near the highest scoring quarterbacks last season, and they weren't even in the real top 5 discussion last season throughout. So really good move, especially if you factor in what Dak was doing early before he got hurt, and of course Josh Allen and Kyler Murray's emergence. So much of that. And what about Jalen Hurts, like another guy that could be that kind of guy? So you have a lot of these players now that really could fill that role. Maybe still waiting on QB, but in 2 QB leagues, 1st round, 2nd round, got to get him.
All right, let's with our last few minutes on here, let's switch it over to rookies. Everybody's always thirsty for rookie information right now. Okay, so that's where we're gonna go. It's a little top heavy with the running backs this year. It's a deep wide receiver class at first glance, and then obviously we all know about the quarterbacks. So do you have a ranking for these top 3 or 4 running backs on the board? And obviously landing spot will dictate a lot. Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year was nobody's first overall pick, and then it became the consensus one. So give us your early take on the top 2 or 3 running backs, and where do you think the landing spots would enhance their value?
So right now, my ranking, I do have Najee Harris number 1 because I think he fits into the most scenarios. Like you said, draft landing spot will mean a ton, but I think there are the most spots where he fits in and could be a 3-down back. Where would
you rank Harris among the last year rookies if you had to slot him in right now?
Oh, wow. That's a question I'm not prepared for. I can't remember who last year's. Oh,
like Swift, Dobbins, Akers, those guys.
You know what? I was higher on that class than this year's class. I have to say that. I think I would have Harris maybe in the Cam Akers range. I would have taken
4-5.
Yeah, that would have been about right where I had him. And so that I'm glad you reframed that question for me. And then second, I'm putting right now Javonte Williams ahead of Travis Etienne because for a similar reason to Najee Harris, I think there are more paths to relevance for him that I think he would see more early work. He can mix it up as a receiver out of the backfield a little bit, enough to be involved there. I worry about Etienne. He has to be in a really nice spot to utilize his passing efficiency, but I still worry about that because he is slight, and I'm very concerned about his ability in pass protection, and especially if we have another truncated offseason that he doesn't get enough reps. That could be a problem if he can't protect his quarterback. So I'm going to have to see how he's utilized. So right now, those are my top three and kind of where I'm sitting with those.
What are some teams that you would call your ideal landing spots for Najee Harris, for Williams, or any of these guys where you're like, oh yeah, now I'm pushing him up. This is what I was hoping for. This is the stuff.
Atlanta is the spot. Atlanta, regardless of running back, with Arthur Smith, with my belief that he can make his players relevant based on their strengths, I think that's an excellent landing spot. Seattle would be a very good landing spot if they don't sign somebody in the meantime, because we know they love to run that football, but Russ can also throw screens to them. Those are probably the two.
How about Pittsburgh? You think the Steelers would be a good spot?
Here's for a receiving back. Yes, that offensive line. I was crowing a few years back when Mike Munchak, the offensive line coach, they let him go. And within 2 years, the coaching concepts went through the floor, but now they're losing talent the last couple of years. Now we'll have Villanueva gone. We already had Pouncey's retiring. They had lost players before. That line could be a bottom 8 line for run blocking, and I am very concerned about how that's going to shake out. So the Steelers, for a pass receiving back, so Ben dumps the ball off, assuming he doesn't lose his job in the first 3 weeks, and that's possible.
To Dwayne Haskins?
We could see Dwayne Haskins.
What? Oh, my Lord.
Hey,
Ben,
man.
No.
As you saw the season go on, Ben's arm got weaker and weaker and weaker. Ben could not throw downfield anymore. They could not use Chase Claypool after week 12. They could not get him the ball. And at this point, if he regresses even further, we're looking at Drew Brees without Drew Brees' accuracy. That's not a good thing.
It's a disaster because Dwayne Haskins is a massive, massive bust. Now, on that, I mean, it's just a disaster. Now, do you sell Deontay Johnson in Dynasty right now? Because that team is about to experience a volume fall off at the quarterback position here. If it's not this year, it's definitely next year, where it's a little scary who's going to be next over there, and can they support a Deontay Johnson who's right now being, I mean, you know, if you give me the season he had last year, I'll take him top 10 wide receivers overall.
Yes, Deontay Johnson was completely volume-based. Double-digit targets in almost every healthy game he played. And yes, when you get volume as a wide receiver, you count on it for fantasy. But he was not very efficient with his usage. He had concentration lapses. He had drops. He didn't run efficiently after the catch. It was a lot of catch and fall stuff. But you're right, Kevin. If he's going to get that volume, you continue to bet on that in a PPR league. But if Pittsburgh can find a better option or a better means to get the ball out, I could see them going away from him very quickly. They benched him for portions of 2 games down the stretch last year for ineffective performance. So there are a lot of red flags on Deontay Johnson. But as you said, if he's going to be in the mix as a top target monster, then yes, you continue to go to that well.
Let me throw one more thing at you here. A team bizarre. I have a feeling they're going to come out of nowhere and make a massive splash, and that's the Broncos. They don't have a quarterback over there, but they have a good rest of the team. They have good wide receivers. They have an okay, decent defense. Even fine everywhere, talent all over the place, but no one to deliver the football. And John Elway seems like the inverse of his skill as a quarterback is in his ability to scout and recruit quarterbacks. Like the inverse. He was a great quarterback and probably the worst at picking quarterbacks. Don't know why. What's going on with John Elway? Why can't he pick a damn good quarterback? And what are they going to do over in Denver?
Well, let's get to the second part. What are they going to do? That is their massive dilemma because they do have an amazing collection of talent, both at receiver and at tight end. Noah Fant is an explosive component of that offense, and Albert Okwebunam is going to come back from injury, and he was showing signs of breakout already.
Gotta have an Okwebunam mention, or it's not a Jim Covenantry.
And KJ Hamler is like fire speed in the slot. And then Cortland Sutton's back. And Jerry Jeudy, we don't know what he'll be yet. But when you have all those weapons, he's not going to see double teams. And so they need a quarterback. Maybe they have to go to Sam Darnold route. I mean, better than what they have right now. We don't know what Darnold quite is. Darnold doesn't know what Darnold is. And we saw how many players escape the death grip of Adam Gase and come out on the other side very good football players. Yep. It's a possibility.
No way. I could see them just emerging as the team that gets Deshaun Watson. Like, how'd they do it? And you don't know. But they did it. And I think they're going to make a splash, but you won't hear about it. It's just going to come out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. So this is what I want you to do on our final question, okay? I want you to give us a player that has a top 15 overall ADP in early best ball, and and which of those players we should absolutely not take because you give them a better chance to bust than the market. And then the second follow-up question is that someone going outside of the top 50 picks, outside of the top 4 rounds, that you think has a solid chance to return first round value. And obviously, we're sitting here in March. A lot of things are going to change. We won't hold you to this, but as it sits right now, who's your first round bust and your middle round gold?
Okay, so the early round bust, I am very concerned about Derrick Henry. The usage has been overwhelming now 2 seasons in a row. And when we count those playoff games in from 2 years ago, last year he was fine. Running backs age very quickly, physical backs. So I think he'll still be very good. Losing Arthur Smith could be very problematic for him.
That's the takeaway for today, by the way, Geek, is the Arthur Smith changing teams. I think that's a very important piece.
Concerns about that whole Titans offense losing. I mean, does this affect AJ Brown? Does this affect other people? Does Tannehill all of a sudden throw more? I don't know.
Right.
It's a good question. It's a very good question. And your next question was like somebody in the top 50.
So someone outside of the top 50. So after the first 4 rounds are over, okay, who is a player that's going in round 5 or later that you think has a legitimate chance to return first round value?
Yeah, and this is one I hadn't thought about ahead of time.
Well, that's why we gave it to you. I like your spontaneity.
I know. And so the player I'm going to say, and it's going to depend upon a quarterback landing there somehow, Denzel Mims.
Wow. Even with the addition of Corey Davis.
Okay.
Because Corey Davis is best suited as that physical chain mover Z. Denzel Mims at 6'3", 207, 93rd percentile speed, 86th percentile explosiveness. He had a learning period last year. If he comes in healthy, he is an explosive player. And I do think there could be a diversity in that offense. If they get a quarterback, he could have that big season we're hoping for.
Geek, everybody on social media was burning their Denzel Mims shares today, and Jim Covenentry just predicted that Mims has a chance to return early round value. If this happens, we are putting him. He's already on our Mount Rushmore fantasy analyst, but you're going on the Mount Rushmore fantasy analyst if that comes true. What a prediction there by Jim.
I love the idea of just buying cheap in Dynasty on Mims here. I mean, and when you say cheap, you're right. You know, the Corey Davis signing, it's got everybody, all the Mims owners are scared right now. You can get him for probably a late second round pick potentially.
You probably get your money back for whatever you paid. If you have 2.5, I bet you the owner might want to take a new shot. So
yeah, so I mean, you could probably sell him for cheap. Man, I'd like to dump my Hank Ruggs shares for some Mims because I've got a lot less confidence in that guy. doing anything after what after being on a team with no wide receivers and he couldn't do anything last year. That's the scary stuff when you see a guy like JJ Arcega-Whiteside, who the team has nothing and he still can't emerge. You're in trouble. Those guys don't emerge year two. That's the scary one. That's the one you want to get out of.
All right. Well, Jim, you did it again. You came here. You delivered for us as always. He is Jim Covenentry at Jim Covenentry NFL on Twitter. Jim, is there anything right now you want the people to be aware of that you're working on?
Just really doing live streams right now. I do SiriusXM when the preseason hits, and so I'm more media, but we have baseball coverage for Rotowire right now. So basically at Jim Covenentry NFL, I'm always happy to do people's shows, come on and talk football. So call me on if you want me to come on and talk. But yeah, the preseason, I'm busy, but not in my typical fashion.
By the way, Geek, we're cutting that out because we like to keep Jim for ourselves.
Yeah,
we don't want
Cut
do
it
not call
out.
Jim. He's exclusive to our show, so he's no longer available.
Jim came with the bold calls, man. You fit right in. Some really bold calls, and that's what we're looking for here. So
man.
I love it.
All right. Till next time, guys. For the Geek, I'm at Alan Zaslowski, and of course, special guest, now veteran and friend of the show as always, at Jim Covenentry NFL. We'll see you next time.
Got the best coaches in the game. We really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief.